Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw.
So to me, photography is the mirror of the past. I've always taken photographs, even long before we took pictures on phones. And I've kept scrapbooks. So I've got our whole lives chronicled in over 40 photo albums where I keep track of everything that I've ever done in my life. And it's done through pictures. As an author, I have captions and I write details about important things that we do. But most of the text of that book really is the photographs, and I revisit them often. I relive them often, and they just reflect back to me where I've been, who I've been with, and the people who've impacted my life most.
Roger, nice, great. Well, Roger, great. First of all, Roger Leslie, nice to meet you, and thank you for joining me on the podcast. Shooting it raw, right? So essentially, we're going to, let's just say there's this cloud, this sort of idea or this emotion or feeling called, how do I make make every second count? Like, can I live, just life is a gift. How do I make every second count? We'll get around there on how that manifests in your life. You're joining me from, you have a green screen sheet or something behind you. So, I don't know, like, where in the world are you, Roger?
I am in Houston, Texas.
What? Oh, another one from Houston. Nice. This is awesome. So many authors and people from Houston.
Oh, we have a great author community here in Houston. We do.
That's amazing. What's in the water? It's great. Hey.
Well, Houston is just a great city because it's so eclectic. There's such a great variety of different people and intellects and races and ethnicities. It is just a phenomenal, welcoming place. It's a great place for an artist or a business person. Anyone is welcome in Texas, and especially in Houston.
Said the mayor. Nice. I've been there once. I loved it. It was good. Look, Roger, I want to get to know you. How the podcast works is you send me 4 photos, and that curates the conversation. So shall we dive in?
I'd love to.
Oh, sweet. Okay. So, and of course, I don't look at them beforehand, and it's always like, okay, what am I going to see now? Oh, look at that. Okay. So just to describe it for the listener. Okay. So it's a book cover. Wait. So it says Rogers Leslie, PhD. So, sorry, Dr. Leslie. Sorry about that.
You can just call me Roger.
Nice. Okay. So, the photo is a black and white photo of you seated at maybe a typewriter. Is that a typewriter? Something at your arm.
It is a typewriter. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. It looks kind of faded. It's a black and white portrait. Very handsome. Very, very handsome. It says, "Light come out of the closet. Memoir of a gay soul." Roger Leslie. What am I looking at? This is your book. Nice.
That is my newest book. It just came out this year. So it is a memoir. And people have asked me, why would I want to write a memoir about a period in my life that happened so long ago? Because the book takes place from the time I'm about 11 till I'm about 16 or 17. And here's what happened, Ran. So for most of my life, my adult life, I haven't reflected too much on that part of my life because it was a very painful time. I grew up in a very strict Catholic environment and very loving parents, but very stern and not very emotional. And everything that I was learning about life and spirituality was following very strict rules. And I was a rule-following kid. I loved pleasing my parents. I loved making my teachers proud. So I focused all my energy on making them proud and pleasing them. But I've always known I was gay. So I had this terrible conflict because everything that I seemed to be noticing and learning from my family, from my religion, and from society told me that by being gay, that negated all the good stuff that I was doing in my life. And that was a terrible struggle for me because spirituality has always been important to me. So this book covers that journey of how I explored what the world was teaching me and how I came to terms with who I am as a spiritual man.
Okay. Okay. Boom. Like all of these things. So first of all, thank you for sharing. Thank you for, I mean, I understand writing. I come from the world of writing. I know about writing books, all that kind of stuff. So I understand the process of sitting down and capturing that narrative. The fact that you have a PhD shows that you have, I mean, that's a very lonely road in a way when you're kind of doing your research and then having to actually capture it into your thesis, into your book. And then, so what is your PhD in?
It's in education.
Okay.
In addition to being a writer my entire life, I was a teacher and a school librarian. Mm-hmm. So my undergraduate work is my degree is in education. My master's degree is in creative writing. I have master's certification in library science, and then I got my PhD in education.
Wow. Respect. Okay. So creative writing, that's part of my bag of training as well. Yeah, so here it is. Like the thesis of the podcast is, how do we make every second count? How do we make meaning of our lives? And in your case, you write this memoir of, is it like, are you essentially trying to bridge, because I'm just going from what you've said, bridge the sort of your experience of, being rejected or feeling rejected, as far as the cues from religion, from society, from your family. I'm sure you're saying they're loving, strict, but loving. So is this memoir you just kind of going back to those experiences to kind of share and uplift? Like why did this book have to be written?
So the purpose of this book is to inspire and encourage people to follow their own spiritual path and to trust what their own spiritual path is. But what part of the reason I decided to write this book is, as I mentioned at the start of the description, I hadn't really thought back on that stage of my life so much because it was painful, and I associated a lot of pain with some negative things I learned in my childhood. But then it occurred to me a few years ago that there are probably hidden blessings in that struggle that helped me become who I am. And I probably would not have become who I am today had it not been for the strict moral upbringing that I grew up with.
Oh, sure.
And so I decided, rather than just associate it with something painful, I wanted to go back and re-explore that stage of my life and find out, what did that stage of my life provide me that gave me the strength to move into myself, to find my own spiritual path, and then to be an author who encourages and inspires other people to do the same.
Mm-hmm. Very well said. Very well said. Okay, so somebody who didn't grow up in Houston, didn't grow up in the U.S., so Houston's considered the South, or is it more like the South is like, when I think of the South, it tends to be like, Georgia and, all those kind of states. I kind of imagine Houston to be a little bit more cosmopolitan, a little bit more chill. Or would you say that growing up there, this notion of spirituality loomed very large in your life, like that? Out of necessity, you said, okay, look, spirituality is such a big part of my life. I have to make sense of it. And how I'm going to make sense of it is not necessarily through this book, because you've been making sense of it all your life, right?
Right. So actually, I grew up in Michigan. I grew up in the Detroit area, and I lived in a very insulated Polish Catholic community.
Okay.
So there wasn't much diversity where I grew up, but part of this novel takes place in the stage where I moved at age 14 from the Detroit area to Houston with my family. And it really was a lifesaver. People have asked me over the years, you were 14 years old. Wasn't that just a horribly difficult transition to make? It is for most children. And really, for me, I do believe it saved my life, because I had done such a poor job of making connections, making social connections my freshman year in high school, because at that point I was very clear that I was gay and I didn't want anybody to know because I didn't know what to do with that knowledge myself. And so I isolated myself to the point where I was very lonely, I was very lost, and there were times that I was even suicidal. Fortunately for me, already at that time, I knew I wanted to be an author, and I was able to filter a lot of those feelings into the characters that I was writing in the stories and screenplays that I was already working on. So I could examine it a little bit vicariously by writing about it. So then we moved to Texas, and that's where I learned diversity, because I went from a Catholic high school, which was very small and very homogenous, to a large public high school in Houston, which was very diverse, lots of different ethnicities, lots of different backgrounds. And of course, this was 1976. So this was the influx of when Michigan and Texas flip-flopped as the largest state, most populous states. I mean, Detroit and Houston flip-flopped the most populous cities. I think they went from 5 and 4, and then the year we moved, it seems like everybody from Detroit moved to Houston because it then was 4 and 5. So that Houston became more populous than Detroit. So there was a great education in finding diversity, and it gave me hope that there might be more to the world than I had experienced, and I was eager to figure out where I fit, because I didn't feel I fit in the world where I grew up.
But, you're also a teenager, right? And a teenager, I mean, that whole, what is your identity is going to happen to everyone, right? Like every kid's going to go through that. Like,
yes. But at the time when I'm a teenager, I was under the assumption, as I believe many teenagers are, because I not only was one, but I taught them for many years, teenagers with their limited level of experience, when they feel something, they often think, oh my gosh, I'm the only person in the world who's thinking this. I'm the only person who's feeling this. Nobody understands me, and nobody can understand me. And of course, I wasn't willing to take risks and share with other people what I was going through, because I didn't understand it myself, that it just further isolated me. I think with technology now and social media, I think maybe teenagers might have more exposure to more diversity, which I think is a wonderful thing. But where I grew up, there were 3 channels for television. There weren't any positive images of gay people anywhere, if there were images at all. And I didn't know any in my family. I really thought I was the only person in the world who felt the way I did. And plus, I perceived myself as a relatively masculine man. And so when there were stereotypes on television, like Liberace or somebody, I thought, well, I don't think I'm like him, and I'm not attracted to somebody like him. So maybe I don't even fit with gay people. I just had no idea.
Right. Light come out of the closet. Okay. So, but it's a proper memoir. So it's a proper, like, sort of revisiting. And so one of the best books about writing that I've come across is by Hélène Cixous. And she talks about what is it to be a writer, right? Really kind of very philosophical about it. And she talks about Franz Kafka and all these people in terms of the bravery of sitting in your room and really going into, like, diving into the territory of yourself that is scary and that is uncertain. But this book is you going back to that time. Now, to somebody who's listening, who's going through their own, like, turbulence or whatever. So why don't you talk about how writing relieved that? You said you could sort of live vicariously. Is that my dog or is that your dog?
I'm afraid that's at my house. I've got somebody to take care of him. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. Listen, I've got 5, so don't worry about it. But yeah, so going back to the question that I almost forgot is, what is it that you, like, when you live vicariously through the thing, because you're working through your ideas and your emotions and whatever. So in writing this book, are you just reporting on the work that you did back then? Or what is the new territory you kind of discovered while creating this book?
That's a great question, Ran. So I had to face the demons that I was avoiding for all these decades because I had to go back and take an honest look at what it was that I was avoiding that hurt so bad back then and determine where the accountability on my part was in how I co-created a really bad situation because of how I interpreted things, because of how I perceived things. I love what you shared about the author and Kafka and so forth, because in addition to being an author, I'm a writing coach, an editor, and a publisher. And I often tell people, my clients, or when I speak in large groups, that in the first draft, you have to bare your soul. Because that's where the truth of the work really is.
Right.
I tell the people who are thinking of writing or who are writing, in that first draft, go as deeply as you can, go where you're afraid to go. And then ultimately, even before you share the work with your editor, you can always go back and look at it. And if it's too personal, if it's too painful, if it's too much, you can always take it out and never show anybody, because that first draft is just for you. But you must bare your soul and you must go where you're afraid to go, because what seems the scariest is really the most alive. And that's what readers are going to connect with.
Wow, you are an educator. I love it. Roger Leslie, Light Come Out of the Closet. Unfortunately, we don't have, the show unfolds very quickly. So I think we should go on to the next photo.
Perfect.
Oh, look at that photo. Great. Okay, so that's so sweet. Okay, so it's you in a so what makes the image, because visually, right, visual. So your big, bright, warm smile, the light is kind of diffuse. You're standing in front of a stucco white wall. There seems to be a ledge. On that ledge there's let's say 20 books. Some are textbooks, actually. And they must be textbooks. Yeah. It's you, bright smile, wearing this very, very deep, rich red sweater with a blue, you can just see the hint of the blue collar underneath. I'd say that this is like a staff photo. Because you said you're a librarian, or you're connected to a library, and there are a lot of library books behind you. So what is this? Why am I looking at this? What is this?
These are actually all books that I have written.
What?
That's my body of work so far. Actually, it's not even all of them, because they're not. That was taken about 5 years ago. So I've had a few books come out since then. But those are the books that I've written. Yes.
Respect. Nice. So are they? What? Okay, is there a limit in terms of? Because some of these are textbooks.
Yes.
Are they?
Yes.
Okay, so do tell. What is this?
So as an educator, sometimes I worked on textbooks, and as a librarian, I co-authored a series of books on library programming to teach librarians how to create programs in their libraries. So the inspiration for this photo, I have an author headshot photographer who takes pictures of me. And one day she said, just bring all the books that you're connected with, all that you've contributed to or written, and let's put them in different positions and let's just see how they go. And the only way we could get all of them in was for me to just stack them vertically, and for me to lean near them. And I think I'm leaning a little bit back in that picture, almost against them. But that's just a representation of the body of my work. And the purpose of this picture is to encourage people that whatever your dream is, just take inspiration to action and just go for it. I first had the inspiration to become a writer when I was 13 years old. Wow. I had no idea whether I had the talent to be a successful writer. I didn't know any writers in my family, so I had no idea how to make a living being a writer. But there was just something inside of me that told me this would be a fulfilling destiny. That's what I want to do. And I just started. And luckily for me, I did not know how long the journey would take, because if at age 13, I knew how long it would be until my first published book came out, I might have been discouraged and not continued, but I had no idea. I kept thinking, any day now, this next one's going to come out. It's going to work. It's going to work. Okay. My first book didn't come out until I was in my early 30s. Okay. But then once they did, they just, once that floodgate opens, once you have that big break, as Hollywood people talk about, Once that happens, the world opens up to you and opportunities show up that you could never have imagined. So I want to
Listen to you.
encourage I want to encourage anybody who's listening that if you have a dream, or even if you've been avoiding a dream or you've had any inspiration, take that inspiration to action. One tiny action will change everything and will propel the trajectory of your life.
You're awesome. You're amazing. So first of all, a couple of things. What is the title of your first book?
My first book was a history of the community where I taught. A friend of mine had asked me if I would write it for the community, and it's called Galena Park, the community that shaped its own history.
Okay. That's a good title. Yeah. Okay. And then, so on the one hand, then there's the content of your words, which are so uplifting and inspiring. There's the energy coming out of your face and your mouth, and, you're just like radiating. The photograph, which I encourage people to look at on YouTube, the website, all that business, is bright, is super bright, because it's a white wall. The light is very it's not washed out, but it's a very well lit, bright image. You're about 1/3 of the space, and again, super bright. You really, you radiate this real positivity. And what are your thoughts about when you inspire, because to inspire somebody else from your own experience, you kind of have to, on the one hand, as you said, and I believe this, kind of reveal the naked, ugly truth of your experience and really get into that not darkness, but that intensity, and then people can connect to it. And then, so what is it in your head that flips it to be so positive, to be so radiant? If you could go back to kind of explain how that is, how would you put that into words?
I believe more than anything, Ran, it's intention. When you wake up in the morning, you set your intention for how you want your life to be.
Wow.
That's the decision you make when you first get up. And I decided many years ago that I want to be a positive influence in this world. And so I have a rule for my life that I can only say positive, encouraging things, period.
Oh.
So, of course, that ends a lot of conversations very quickly.
It's just like, okay, we can't talk anymore. Okay.
But that's not to say I can't explore issues. I love to talk about ideas. I love to talk about philosophies. I enjoy digging deep and figuring out what makes people think the way they think and believe the way they believe, but always in a positive light. I taught high school English for many years, and my goal as a teacher was, because I taught seniors the last several years, and I realized this was the last opportunity these students would have to get educated in a free education system. So I knew they didn't all have the passion for reading and writing that I did, but I knew they all had potential to make their dreams come true. So I began the school year by teaching them how to set a goal. And then the rest of the year, all the literature we read tied in somehow to how can I use this to show me how to take my own journey to where I want to go, whatever that was. And I think that's part of the intention. You just have to focus on what is it that you want, where are you going? And my belief more than anything is that everybody and everything we encounter is not a lesson for us. It's just a mirror of what's going on in us. So if I see something in somebody else that I don't like, rather than judging them, I turn it back on myself and think, what is it about me that I'm uncomfortable with that would make me turn this thought into a judgment against someone else? So that instead of focusing on, oh, that person needs to change or what's wrong with that person, I think instead, what is it I need to work on now so that I can be at peace, so that when whatever that person illustrates to me shows up, I've grown from it, I've learned from it, I'm a better person because of it.
Okay. I'm just going to not talk for a second to let that sit. Okay, so in order to get to those insights and to that kind of yeah, just a mental awareness, right? In terms of, because you had to learn to have that reflex from somewhere. Is it from study, in terms of either studying psychology or studying schools of thought? Is it from painful experience or not painful experience, right? Is it from modeling somebody? Like, how did you come to learn that?
I think getting back to light come out of the closet, the
Mm-hmm.
struggle that I went through ultimately taught me I choose how I feel and how I think. And I need to make better choices if I'm not happy.
Wow.
For the longest time, I thought, oh, the world was unfair to me, or, that I started out with, with a shortcoming in our society that was going to hold me back. Then I realized I get to choose that thought. I get to
Mm,
choose how I interpret what I think of everything. So why not choose how can I learn from this? How can I become a better person from this? And how can I be happy now?
mm,
Because even though I taught my students goal setting, I said the objective is never to be happy when you achieve the goal. The objective is to figure out how to be happy and enjoy the journey, because the
right.
journey is really all there is. Once you achieve any goal that you're after, your mind automatically sets a new goal. There's
Right.
somewhere higher to go, somewhere better. So the key is to enjoy the journey. And so the focus constantly must be, what can I do now? What can I do today to make the quality of my life such that I can be proud of who I am and have no regrets by the time I get to the end of my life?
I love. Okay. I love what you said, but I'm also sensitive to how you said it, because you clearly have been in front of a classroom many years. Your brain just works in that way of saying, I'm going to present, and it's the whole PhD as a scholar and all this stuff, that, okay, I'm going to present my opening statement. I'm going to make my case, and then I'm going to wrap it up, put it in a box, and then hand it over. So yeah, like, well said. Okay, here's a question for you. So you moved to Houston. You don't have any gay models or friends in Detroit, right? So then you get to Houston. So when was the first time you had either a gay friend or that you were able to put out into the world to somebody else? And it was probably quite private and scary and tentative, but how old were you the first time you were able to because it's one thing to feel it internally, but it's another thing to kind of go, and then you kind of put it out there. So how old were you when you put it out there?
When I first shared it with anybody, I shared it with my sister when I was 16.
Okay.
And she was very considerate. She was very compassionate and didn't say anything to anybody, but didn't really have much to say by way of helping me. She just
Mm-hmm.
listened. And then I had what I think is a fairly unique experience, because before I ever met any gay people, I came out to my parents when I was 17.
Okay. Wow.
I just knew at that point that I had not done anything with anybody, but I was going to explore that possibility. And I didn't want my parents to find out some other way. And so I
Mm-hmm.
sat them down when I was a senior, and I'd write about this in the book too. It's a very painful scene, but enlightening. And I told them that I was gay, and it was a very difficult conversation. And there was a lot to process afterwards for each of us, not just for
Mm-hmm.
me. But then ultimately, a few months later, after I left for college, that's when I first started meeting gay people.
Okay. Yeah, well, it says a lot about your character and values and who you are as a person, and also a reflection of your parents in terms of who they are, that you'd be like, okay, we're going to have a difficult conversation now. And then you do, and it's not it says so much about you that you're like, okay, I'm going to work with my parents. We are a family. I'm going to work with them to share, even though it's not easy, to have the difficult conversation. So it says tons about who you are, who they are. I mean, it's very, in its own way, uplifting.
Yes. And they were very, very honorable parents, always. They
Mm-hmm.
taught us they modeled and they taught us how to be good human beings, always. My father is
Listen to
still
you.
alive. I see him regularly. He's in a
Oh,
senior living center not far from me. My mom died in 2016, but yes, extremely decent, honorable people.
oh,
I love them very much.
amazing. Yeah, and that really communicates. So my professional world side is as somebody who does training, and coaching and stuff, and one of the missions, well, the main mission of what I call service network leadership is just be a decent human being.
Yes.
And you're crushing it. Look at you. Well done.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Next photo.
Yes.
Not so much a photo as an illustration of sorts, and I love this kind of stuff. Okay, so it says it's almost like this weird kind of ink representation or rendering. So there's all black, but there's white. So it's just basically black and white, not very much gray. It's like a white sort of frame or silvery frame, and in that frame it says Houston Literary Awards. Literary Excellence, Roger Leslie, October 19th, 2019. Let's see, I can't remember. My history in my mind is just all slurry, a big slurry with the pandemic. So this was before the pandemic. Houston Literary Awards, take it away.
So I want to encourage people to realize that when they pursue their goals, sometimes what they're going for directly will happen, like the publication of a book, but sometimes unexpected miracles and magic occurs. This was one of those magic moments for me because the downtown Houston library system decided they wanted to start a literary award, and they chose 5 authors to receive this Lifetime Achievement Award in their inaugural year, and they chose me as one of those authors. I had no idea they were doing this. I had no idea. I was connected to school libraries before I retired from public education, but I was not connected to the public library at all. I just received a call saying that I'm an honoree for this very prestigious award.
Oh,
And
wow.
it just happened. So I want
Wow.
to encourage people as they're on their journey, just when they think it's time to give up, or just when they think, the rewards are not coming, something unexpected will happen, that fate will move you in the direction that you are meant to go. So trust that process and realize that sometimes the rewards that you are expecting don't happen, but very often some that you had no way of anticipating will change everything.
Wow. Okay. So here is where what you just said landed in my head. I may get a little verklempt. I may get a little choked up. Okay, so my main work, and like many humans, I take great, like my identity is very wrapped up in the kind of work that I do. And 3 years ago, my main sort of client became very sick, and then so I've been really struggling for 3 years, and it's been a very intense roller coaster, up and down for 3 years, really. So this sense of living life, and then when you can't expect it, even the reward that you think you're aiming for, that's you're trying to target, may elude you, but something out of the blue is going to cross, and like in this particular case for yourself. So I'm feeling that right now. Right now, I'm in that moment of just like being at the bottom of a well. Do you know Haruki Murakami?
I don't.
What? Japanese author, very, very novelist, writes amazing books. A really good book, if you're into novels, is The Wind-Up Bird Chronicles. Okay, that's an aside. It's like I'm at the bottom of this well looking up. All I see is this light. And so, yeah, so where were you at when that call came in? Like, what was your life? Like, what was your headspace? What was your headspace? And when you're one day out of the blue, this phone call comes in and says, "Hey, guess what? You're a nominee or for this award."
So I had retired from my job in public education a few years earlier, and I was just out there, working on my different, all the different projects that I was working on, and I was always focusing on my writing first. But in order to make ends meet financially, I was coaching, I was publishing other people's books, I was editing, and I love to help other people make their dreams come true. So it was a somewhat rewarding experience personally. But all along, I kept thinking, but my dream is to be a writer, to make a living as a writer, and to thrive just from my writing career, not necessarily to, there was always a side job. There were always several side jobs. I was teaching, I was a librarian, I was a professor, I was, a writing coach. There was always something else, just like, but my dream when I was very young was just to be a writer. And at that time, I wasn't making any money from the books. There were no royalties coming in from the books. Maybe a little bit trickling in from some of the books that had been published several years back, but nothing substantial enough to make me feel like, wow, I really am living the dream fully. And then that came around, and that was my sign to keep going, to keep trying.
Nice.
And here's what's interesting, Rand. Not long after that awards banquet, the pandemic hit. And in March of 2020, all of my editing clients, all of my coaching clients, and all my publishing clients disappeared because nobody knew what was going to happen. They thought it was the end of the world. Nobody was spending money. That freed my schedule completely. So what did I do? I thought, you know what? Here is my opportunity. I'll stay home and write and write and write. Now I have about 6 books down the pike ready to come out because during that time, I did nothing but write. So everything was turning, and the pivotal moment was that award that told me, keep going, keep trying, don't give up. It's going to happen. You've just got to keep moving on. You can't necessarily see to the top of the mountain, but you can see the next step. Keep taking the next step.
Yes, Roger is in the house. Inspiration. I love it. This is great. This is totally great. Okay, so for somebody who comes to, okay, so you came to writing very early. You've always known. Some people come to writing a little later and they're just like, speaking of Haruki Murakami, I think he started a little later on, like in his 20s or 30s or something. But yeah, like what is your process as a writer?
Anytime I get inspired to write a book, I start it. I just start it. It doesn't matter if I'm working on other books. I just need to start it. If it's a matter of writing a little bit of text to get the ideas flowing, I'll do that. It might be that I just jot down some ideas or outline a concept, but I always have several books going, and I keep them all in separate folders in my computer so that I can refer back to them. And I have 3 main folders in that one section: past books, current books, and future books. And I just keep rearranging them. They keep moving from future books to current books, from current books to past books. And I just keep going. But when it comes to the writing process, I just dive in and start the first draft. I am more right-brained in many ways than left-brained. So writing that first draft comes, it's more instinctive to me.
Yeah.
But I just have to follow the journey and follow the path of where the characters take me if it's fiction, or where the ideas take me if it's nonfiction. I tell my students who are more left-brained or who prefer an outline, feel free to make a cursory outline and then follow it flexibly.
Yeah.
But don't revise at all during the first draft, because you don't know what to edit until you've finished the whole first draft.
Right.
And that's my process. I just plow right through a book from beginning to end and see where the characters take me. And then the next revision is usually excising huge chunks of that, because it took me a while to find where the characters were going and what I was really doing. So I usually have an overall concept, a purpose in mind, like, why am I writing this book, and who my main audience is. If the writers of any type, aspiring or seasoned, have those 2 things in mind, your purpose and your reader, if you're clear on those 2, then that really is all you need to guide you through the whole process of writing the book.
Nice. excellent advice. You've obviously given advice before. It's really good. Well done. No, I love it. I totally, and I love meeting people like you. Okay, so this was one of those. For a while, my friend, because I have an arts degree, right? And so for a while, my artist friends or whatever, we would always talk about Bob Ross and the happy accident, right? And so can't say that getting the award was a happy accident. It was just like an amazing sort of gift from the universe saying, okay, here you go. All the work you've done, actually, look, it's being recognized. But how about you talk about a happy accident, like a proper happy accident, connected to one of your books or connected to writing?
So here's one of my favorite stories. What you call a happy accident, I call a fateful detour.
Oh, nice.
F-A-T-E-F-U-L, fateful detour. So here's
Love
what
it.
happened. I was a classroom teacher, and I just finished my degree in creative writing. As soon as I finished that degree, I was very clear, no more school. I'm not going back to school. I'm going to stay home, write in the evenings, work on getting published, sending out to publishers throughout the weekend. I was very clear, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. I had my eye on that straight line.
Nice.
My principal called me into his office and said, our librarian is retiring. I would like you to take the job. Immediately, I told him, thank you, but I don't want to change jobs and I don't want to have to go back to school to get the library science degree because I want to be a writer. He said, well, just think about it. He said, and overnight, I will contact the administration building and see, since you have a master's already, if I can give you an emergency certification, and then you'll just need, and then you can just go ahead and get the library science certification, the 18 extra hours that I needed over the next year. And so I said, okay, I'll think about it. And I went home and I had a good talk with God. And I said, God, you're not listening. I want to be a writer. I don't want to get another job. I don't want to change careers. But the more I talked, the more I realized, okay, if this is a direction that's my fate knows is best for me, I'm going to take the job. If the principal says, yes, you got the emergency certification, I can give you the job immediately. I said, I don't understand, but I'll take it. Of course, that's exactly what happened. I took the job and I started back to school that summer begrudgingly. Well, 2 women ran that library science program.
Okay.
One of them, I wrote some reviews for a children's lit class I took for her. She loved the reviews so much, she sent some of them to Booklist, which is the main review journal of the American Library Association. I didn't do an interview. I didn't fill out an application. About 6 months after she sent them in, I went to my front door. There was a box of books. In there was a letter saying, welcome to Booklist. You're one of our reviewers. Here's how many words your reviews need to be. This is when they're due. This is how much you'll get. Without any effort at all, I was getting published bi-weekly with 7 bylines in this prestigious magazine. It gets better.
Wicked.
The other woman who runs the library science program, she had written a book on library programming. And her publisher called her and said, this one's going out of print. We'd like you to write a new one. She said, it's too much work by myself. If I got a co-author, would you accept that? They said, yes. She knew I wanted to be a writer. At this point, I just had the Galena Park book out, so I really had not made much headway. So she called me after class one day and she said, would you be interested in writing a book with me? I said, yes. We met. Nice. The first day we started putting notes together, we realized her background was in elementary education. Mine was in secondary. We had not 1, but 3 books that we could write.
Wow.
Within 6 months of not wanting to take the job because I didn't want to go back to school, I met the 2 women who changed the trajectory of my career. Because within 6 months, I was being published bi-weekly in the most prestigious library journal in the country. And I had a 3-book contract with one of the biggest publishers in the nation.
Amazing.
That's a fateful detour. Those are those happy accidents. You have to trust. Fate knows where you're going, even if you can't see it. I say, trust it, trust it, trust it. You are destined to do something great. Follow that path. It's going to happen no matter what you dream.
Roger, you gave me goosebumps. Okay, fine. Be like that. Okay, let's go on to the next photo. Love it. Oh, dude. Okay, this is great. Okay, now this is okay. Is this you in the photo? It's called
Yes.
My First Last Year. Okay, so
Yes.
in a green shirt, photographed, I guess, on a bench.
Yes.
You're seated on the bench. It says my first last year, and it says first place Texas autobiography. There's a quote. I can't read it because the image is a bit rendered small on my monitor. So it's basically in a green shirt, gray charcoal pants, nice leather shoes, seated casually, looking at the photographer. Not the same radiant smile of the previous shot, with all the books. Still, you're looking like you're smiling. You're looking ahead. My first last year. Okay, take it away.
So first of all, Ran, I would like you to repeat what the purpose of this podcast is. Repeat what the theme is that you said earlier.
Yeah. If life is a gift, how do we make every second count?
There is no accident that this is the last picture you pulled up.
Okay.
Because here's what happened. One night, several years back, I had a dream. And I was told in the dream to live the next 365 days as if I would never experience those calendar dates again.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't necessarily say I was going to die, but it said pack everything in that year so that when you get to the end of your life, whenever it might be, I would have no regrets.
Wow.
Then the dream continued. It said, while you're living this year, write about it and publish that journal as a book. And then after you publish the book, teach other people how to do it too. That morning, I jumped out of bed, wrote down the dream so I would not forget any detail, and I began living what I call my first last year.
Dude, what? Who
Yes.
are you?
I tell you, gifts come from the universe in all different kinds of ways. If you're just on the journey and you're paying attention, life is helping you make your dream come true at every corner.
Listen to you. Okay, so your first last year. Okay. I believe in big projects, right? So for the podcast, arguably is one of them. So it's been about 4 years now. Previous to that, I did a marine conservation project, just a big one. It's ambitious. Previous to that, I did a really large photo project where for 350 weeks, I did 350 conceptually different photos. I'm just connecting, and I don't mean to bore you, but connecting, say, how I respond to hearing that about my first last year. Now, okay, you obviously have a story about that first last year, 365 days. And I love of the spirit of it. And yeah, why don't you shed some light and inspire people from that?
Primarily what I learned from living that experience is that there are 3 elements to our lives that are worth focusing on. What we do for ourselves, what we do for our loved ones, and the legacy we want to leave the world. And so the first thing I did the first day I started my first last year was to start writing down some goals. My husband and I were heading out to do a wedding. He was a minister, so he was doing a wedding, and it was quite a distance away. So we were sitting in the car and we just started listing everything we wanted to do. So if by chance this was actually the last year of my life, I wanted to pack everything in. So we decided everything we wanted to do. And then as I looked through the list, I decided, well, which of these seemed like just for me, which seemed like something I want to do for somebody else, and which seemed like legacies I want to leave the world. And so when I teach my classes related to my first last year, that's one of the first activities we do is everybody lists their dream goals and then divides them in those 3 different categories. And one of the best benefits of having lived that experience is it requires you to learn how to be very present.
Mm-hmm.
If, for example, I was thinking right now, and I'm thinking this right now as I'm looking at you, Ran, what if this is the last interview I ever do? Mm-hmm. What is it that I want to say to you? What is it that I want to say to my audience? So that makes me very present. I'm looking at your eyes right now, and I'm much more aware of being connected to you in this moment than I was, say, earlier in the the interview when I was trying to think, well, what am I going to say about that? Or when you ask me a question. So just moving into that sense of being present extends the quality of your life because you're living each moment more vibrantly. It's not like your mind is not somewhere else waiting for something wonderful to happen, or, well, when my birthday gets here, I'll do this, or when I finally take the vacation, it's like, now, what am I doing this minute? How do I want to connect with other people? What do I want to gain from this moment? What do I want to give someone else in the moment? So being able to slow down that mental process and just become present, and then have the sensory experience of, what do I feel right now? What am I seeing? What smells are nearby? What sounds are affecting this conversation? All those elements are part of the process of just slowing down, becoming aware that the quality of your life is essential. The quantity is unpredictable.
In an exchange, in a conversation, you're putting out these concepts, these ideas, and what I do is I listen, and then the connections I make are like, well, you're a very philosophical, introspective person who's had training and exposure on how to deconstruct and articulate these ideas to yourself, and then to share it with others, which you're doing now, which is great. So, in a sense, like, so when you've had near-death experiences, when you come present to this idea of your own mortality, so in a way, you had this dream that said to you, okay, for the next 365 days, this is basically your last one, your last September 16th, your last October 40, October 17th, whatever it is, right? And it makes you super, completely, totally present. How did it stick from day to day to day and not kind of go away after a month? Because in a way, to maintain the momentum, you have to commit to it. And obviously, you're the kind of person who makes those commitments. So what is it that we can tell somebody who's listening who isn't that kind of person to find the resource to be able to kind of make that commitment to stick to it, whatever it is?
There are surprises along the way, and the journey shifts and changes, so it never becomes predictable. As soon as I got to the point where I thought, okay, I've got this, I understand how this works, I can kind of cruise through life, something unexpected would happen. Our dog suddenly died, and I had a whole new set of emotions to deal with.
Oh, yeah.
One of my great aunts, whom I adored and who was one of my mentors in life, she passed away. And I had to deal with her loss and what I was going to do with those feelings. So in addition to some fabulous things happening, I mean, I took the dream trip that I'd held off because I always said, oh, I can't afford it, it's too much, was a Mediterranean cruise. Nice. I told myself, I can't wait. This is it. This is my first last year. And what was wonderful about that is, instead of thinking or making up excuses why I couldn't, as soon as I said I had to do it, my thinking shifted to say, okay, how can I create this experience with the limited resources I had? And lo and behold, it fell into place just perfectly.
So my first last year, Roger Leslie, is available through all bookstores, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes.
Yes. I don't necessarily want to hijack the direction of where you want to take the conversation, but I also want to ask the question of, because it's always interesting to me to see like how the universe responds, right? So you put this book out, and in a way you don't know how people are going to respond. And obviously you got like first place autobiography. You got an award, you got recognized. But is there a thing that happened from the book that you touched somebody, you reached somebody, you inspired somebody, that you're just like, that's it. That's why I wrote the book. It's because of that.
There have been many experiences like that. Most of them come through the classes that I teach. I call them fly. Oh, wow. I call them fly classes. And here's how that came about, Ran. So sometimes I was out somewhere and I wasn't at a computer, and I was journaling about what was happening and keeping a record of everything. And I called it my first last year because I didn't want to call it my last year. I just didn't want to give the universe any ideas.
Yeah, exactly.
that I was really wrapping things up. So I decided to be on the safe side. I'll call it my first last year. And I kept writing it out. And finally, it became cumbersome to write out the whole word. So I decided just to abbreviate first last year. And it turned out FLY, fly. And that became the metaphor for the class.
Nice.
In the first time I taught the class, many years back, right after the book came out, there was a woman who wanted to see her brother in England. She was a lifelong diabetic. She wasn't in good health. She didn't have the money to do it, but something told her. In fact, during that class session, she just blurted out, "I want to see my brother." And she told the group afterwards, I really hadn't, that wasn't even on the list of things I wrote. It just sort of came to me. And so she explained her limitations. And she said, well, I don't know where I can stay because my brother lives in a small place. I can't stay with him. Somebody else in the group said, oh, I have a place in that town where she wanted to go. She said, you're kidding. She said, well, I don't have a way to get, she had to fly out of Austin to get there. She said, I can't drive that far. I don't have a way to get there. Well, somebody else, another couple in the group, they were starting their drive around the country. And they said, well, we'll make our first stop Austin and just drop you off at the airport and we'll take you there.
Wow.
So she went to England, and the first day she walked around some, and she had to go uphill to get to her brother's house. And along the way, she was a naturalist, and she found this apothecary shop that had some really great things in it that she wanted to bring back, but she didn't really remember exactly where it was. She said the first day she was there, she walked up this hill to get to her brother's and really struggled because it was she was in her late 60s, early 70s by then, and was diabetic and was struggling. So she said the last full day she was there, she wanted to go back to that shop. And she said she had started at the bottom of the hill again and knew it was somewhere up heading toward her brother's. She said that she walked so fast up that hill that she passed the shop and didn't even see it.
Okay.
And so she said that was the trip of her lifetime. Well, it turned out that actually was her last year.
Oh.
Less than 9 months later, she died.
Wow.
That's one of those moments where I thought, okay, I didn't do this dream didn't come to me just to do this for me. I'm to do this to help other people as well.
Yeah.
And that's part of the legacy I want to leave.
What an amazing platform, stage, context, environment, setting, habitat, all the words, right? To say, okay, everyone, gather round 20, 30 people, 15 people, 100 people. We're going to get really present to this idea. How uplifting. How, Roger, this is crazy. Amazing.
I am blessed by the experience every time.
Yeah. Well, yes. So in my training, we say that, to make a complete review of who you are as a service network leader is, you have these 12 dimensions. Let's say 12 is arbitrary in a way. Less than 12, if you want it to be holistic, we identify 12. But anyway, so one of the dimensions we called the spiritual dimension, but it's whether you're an atheist like me or any other religious thing, it's not necessarily religion. It's just something that is greater than yourself, right?
Yes. So
we have only a couple of minutes of this amazing conversation to go. How about you take it from here and in whatever direction you want? And I mean, this is my last conversation. But I love it. So please, how do you want to put a seed in somebody's brain to kind of get your book, but also live?
More than anything, Rand, I want to let your audience know that your destiny is shaping you and choosing you just as much as you're choosing it. That if you'll just slow down and pay attention to where your life is and where you'd like it to go, if you'll just respond to where it's leading you, it's going to be better than you can ever imagine. I used to believe that an inspiration was the beginning of an idea that could change our lives, I realize now that before we ever have an inspiration, life has already set up before us all the circumstances and all the people we need to help us make that dream come true. So by the time we latch onto our own dreams, our ideas of where we want our life to go, life's already set the stage for us to succeed. So, whether you're an atheist, whether you're very spiritual, whether you are very religious, there's just another dimension that makes life fuller than the concrete world that we know. And if you can pay attention to what intuitively feels right to you and follow that, your life is going to be so much more phenomenal than your mind alone can only imagine.
Roger, thank you so much. Thank you.
This has been my pleasure. Thank you, Ran.
Oh, Roger, amazing.
I love talking with you. This is great.
Oh, okay. Take really good care.
Thank you so much.
Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw.